Hey everybody, welcome to our March Madness special podcast where we're going to be breaking down where we expect the brackets to go this year. Chad, I'm really looking forward to this. I have been looking forward to it, frankly, since we started coming up with these podcasts. This is one that I think is going to be really, really exciting for us.
I mean, I already like March. My birthday's in it, but you know what? March Madness is just the icing on the cake. It's that late birthday present that I get to enjoy every year. But we're going to start out in the South region. For me, personally, I filled out my own bracket. I know we have one shared for our podcast here, and you have one as well. But for the South, for me, my personal bracket, I have Florida representing the South in the Final Four. What about you?
I had the same thing. I really love their defense. They're coming and playing really, really well. They're the SEC, both tournament and regular season champions. It's hard to go against the number one overall seed in this case. So I'm definitely with you on that one. From here, we're gonna jump down into the East. There's a lot of different teams I think could come out here, Chad. Personally, maybe I'm a little bit biased. I went with my own Michigan State Spartans. They're playing hot right now. Just beat Michigan in the Big Ten championship. But the thing to look out for is the fact that you have 5 major conference champions in this particular section of the bracket, and that could be very difficult for really any team to get out.
I mean, like you said, this is the toughest portion of the bracket by far. You look at the teams. You have Virginia, Michigan State, Iowa State, Villanova. That's just some of them. That's a tough bracket, but for me personally, I see Iowa State coming out of it. I think Michigan State will falter against Virginia. Virginia's been playing hot. They've been the hot hand recently. So has Michigan State. But Iowa State has been very, very hot as of late as well. And I think with Edgem, he will help push Iowa State forward and represent the East region in the Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, I have Iowa State doing very well. So, I mean, like you said, very, very tough area. Now let's jump over to the Midwest, and this is kind of like that wild card area because, the number 1 seed is Wichita State, and a lot of people are not hot on them. They've got a tough 4 seed in Louisville. You look at Michigan, Duke. Chad, who do you got here?
I actually have us going to the Bluegrass State, Louisville representing the Midwest. Everyone's talking so highly on Wichita State, and I might be the Scrooge, but I'm just not. I'm one of those people who needs to see more from Wichita State. I am one of the many people who are saying, you know what, show me what you have, what you got against these tougher teams. That's why I am in favor of this tough road that Wichita State will have to take to get to the their hopeful end result. But when it comes down to it, I see Louisville beating Wichita State and eventually representing the Midwest in the Final Four. What about you?
Well, I'm actually going against it. I have Wichita State, and I think some of that's just the fact that they are a former Final Four team. They went last year as, I believe, an 8 or 9 seed, and they brought everyone back. I think that's the key to this. It's not like they lost a bunch of guys and they had to retool. They're undefeated, which may be something against them. They haven't, understood what it's like to really be pushed by some of these teams, but I really like Wichita State. Now we're going to jump up to the West. This is another one where I'm not personally a fan of a lot of the teams in here. I just don't see the strength in this area when especially having looked at the East. So, Chad, what's your team from the West?
Team from the West. We're going to see McBuckets go to the Final Four. Doug McDermott has been the Wooden Award person to watch this whole season. A lot of people have said it's his award to lose, and I agree with that. And I think he's going to pad that. He's going to make his presence felt in this tournament as they go to the Final Four representing the West.
I see something very particular with that. And, we talk about big players showing up at big times. I mean, we go back to the past, and 2 that jump out to me as being, superstars now in the NBA. Look at Dwayne Wade with Marquette, Carmelo Anthony with Syracuse. They took their team into the Final Four. And I see Doug McDermott doing the same thing. He is an absolute star in the college basketball. Creighton's going to the Final Four for me. So let's go ahead and just, go ahead and review what we have going to the Final Four. I have Florida, Michigan State, Wichita State, and Creighton. What about you, Chad?
I have, like you said, Florida. I have Iowa State, not Michigan State, Creighton, and Louisville.
Now, what are you looking at for the national championship game, Chad? You said you had Florida versus Iowa State. You have Creighton versus Louisville. Who's winning these matchups?
I think it's going to be Florida against Doug McDermott and the Blue Jays of Creighton. I think in the end, Florida will come out victorious. It's going to be a closer game than what most people may think. I see it being 75-68 advantage in Florida's favor, them taking the trophy home to Gainesville, Florida. What about you?
I went with Michigan State against Wichita State. Again, I'm sure I'm one of the few that believe in Wichita State. I just think that they're a team, and I love the fact that you get a team-oriented group of guys. And that's what I see out of Wichita State. And Michigan State's just turning it on at the right time. That's dangerous to me. They were the number 2 team to start the year. That putting that together at the right time. So I have Michigan State, Wichita State. I have Michigan State winning it all. Winning it 79-68 over the Shockers. Now, Chad, you mentioned it before. We went ahead and made one between ourselves for this podcast. Now, the way we did it, folks, is basically that we split up the picks where we alternated, and that making it a little bit more fun. So we would have to work with each other's picks. If I had this, one team winning a game and Chad had a different one, but Chad got to pick that. Well, I have to now work with this new team that's now winning it. So we're going to go ahead and start in the South region. I went ahead and picked the number 1 seed in this game. Obviously, I'm going to take Florida in this one. It's hard to go against the number 1 seed, seeing as 16 seed has never won a game.
Yeah, and Florida will have to face the winner of, you go down 1, Colorado, number 8 seed, against Pittsburgh, the number 9 seed. I picked Pittsburgh. Personally, I think what Pittsburgh's been able to do in the ACC has been good. They have played better quality opponents, I believe, and I just see them being able to outlast Colorado. I think it'll be a closer game, but I think when it comes down to it, they'll squeak it out. Pittsburgh winning it.
All right, from there, we go to the 5-12 game in the South. We're talking about VCU versus Stephen F. Austin. Now, a lot of people do not know about the Lumberjacks of Stephen F. Austin, but for those of you that may know what I'm talking about, we've seen Stephen F. Austin roll for 28 straight wins. They last lost before Thanksgiving. That is huge to me. While you can argue that their quality of opponents hasn't been as strong, I still see them beating VCU. I just don't see the Rams as being that top team that can go ahead and go. And you see a 12-5 at least once every year. I think this is the one to watch.
Yeah, one quick note. VCU is not a surprise team anymore. So people are preparing for them more. So Stephen F. Austin is going to prepare for them, and they're going to be ready. But they're going to be facing the winner of number 4 UCLA and number 13 Tulsa. Plain and simple, I think UCLA is going to win it. I don't see Tulsa putting up much of a battle. Thus, UCLA moving on and advancing to the next round.
All right, next we go Ohio State-Dayton, a nice battle in the state of Ohio. Personally, I like the Buckeyes in this one. I'm not a big fan of the team itself. They've been very hot and cold all season long, but the Flyers just sneaking into the tournament does not make me feel too good about them. Big Ten prevails.
Number 3, Syracuse facing number 14, Western Michigan. And when it comes down, yes, Syracuse has been stumbling as of late, haven't been playing the best basketball, but it's Syracuse, it's the NCAA tournament. I think they definitely play better opponents than those in the MAC, and I see them better prepared and winning it easily in the first round.
Going up from there, we look at the New Mexico Lobos versus the Stanford Cardinal. This is one of those toss-it-up kind of games to a lot of people. I'm not sure I agree with that. 7-10, it can be very, very tricky, but I like the Lobos in this one. Let's not forget the fact that they beat San Diego State twice this year, and San Diego State is the Mountain West champion this season. And then you look at they beat Cincinnati earlier this year. New Mexico's played some good opponents considering the fact that they're in the Mountain West. Not sure I see a lot of strength in the Pac-12. I like New Mexico.
They'll be facing either number 2 Kansas or number 15 Eastern Kentucky. Yes, Kansas is playing without their star center Joel Embiid, but this is a first-round matchup. I don't see them stumbling and faltering and falling to Eastern Kentucky. I see Kansas winning this in a landslide. I think the Wiggins that everyone has been praising and been waiting to see shows up, and he gets them that first round win. It's a matter of what happens in these later rounds, and we'll end up seeing that later.
Absolutely. Now we're going to jump to the East. I picked for the number 1 seed in the last part of the bracket. Now it's Chad's turn. Chad, Virginia, Coastal Carolina. What do you think?
Virginia, plain and simple. Out of all the number 1 seeds, yes, Wichita State is undefeated. So if I were to say that, I'm going to say Wichita State eliminated, not thinking about them at the moment. Virginia is the hottest number 1 seed out of the teams, I believe. And I think that they'll continue that hot streak in a rout of Coastal Carolina.
All right, well, now we go. Memphis, George Washington, the 8-9 matchup. Memphis has really been struggling lately. George Washington, they just seemed a little more impressed with me overall this season. Definitely in my mind a toss-up game, could go either way, but I do like the George Washington Colonials to come out in this one.
You talk about toss-up game, and I think you're gonna see that in the next game that I'm about to talk about. Number 5 Cincinnati facing number 12 Harvard. Personally, right here I picked Cincinnati to win it in this case, but I wouldn't be shocked if they faltered and lost to Harvard. Harvard is a under-the-radar team that is solid. UC really hasn't been playing the best basketball, and everyone knows if you get Kilpatrick taken out of the picture, there aren't many scoring threats. So I think UC needs to watch out, but in this case, I think UC will win it and scrape by the first round.
Next, we have Michigan State against Delaware. It's a 4-13 matchup. As we've already kind of talked about with my bracket, I see Michigan State doing very, very well. So not too much of a struggle for this one. Michigan State's going to take this one.
Number 6 UNC facing number 11 Providence. The question is, UNC has been a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team lately. This year, which UNC will show up? Unfortunately, I don't think the right UNC team is going to show up. Providence is going to upset them and head on to the second round.
Well, I talking about that matchup, I really like Cotton for Providence. He is a stone cold killer when it comes to scoring. Look out for him. He's going to actually play. I think he's going to play really well in that one. Next, we have Iowa State versus NC Central. Kind of a no-brainer to me. I really just see Iowa State kind of handling this one pretty well. You talked about Edgem earlier, and then you have to also look at DeAndre Kane. Exactly. They've got 2 stars. I just don't see NC Central being able to knock those two.
And another thing you have to consider too is I believe Iowa State has 4 players that average 10-plus points per game. And that's a threat. When you have that many players averaging double figures, that shows that you can score. But we're moving on. Number 7, UConn facing number 10, St. Joe's. That's a close matchup. All these 7-10s, like we've mentioned, can be close games. Hard to pick which team's going to go. St. Joe's has been hot lately, and you got to wonder, are they getting hot at the right time? But I think Napier's going to take over. UConn's going to come away with this one.
Well, Napier's made a habit of getting some last-second wins, so wouldn't surprise me if he makes another big play for them. Villanova, Milwaukee, not too much of a question mark with me. Again, with a 2-15. While I'm not too impressed with Villanova this season, the fact is they've won the games they're supposed to win. What else can you ask for? I see them handling this one fairly easily. Villanova will be moving on to the round of 32. Now we're going to jump over to the Midwest. It's my turn to take the number 1 seed. So Wichita State against the playing game of Cal Poly versus Texas Southern. Is it even worth asking? Of course I'm going to take the number 1 seed. Wichita State takes this one.
I mean, I completely agree with that. I do want to note one thing. These playing games are huge, and we've seen that. And with Cal Poly coming into this playing game with a 13-19 record, they won their conference tournament, but they're 13-19. That didn't really rub me well when I saw that they got in, and teams like SMU being left out of the tournament who played better opponents. But
you have to understand the fact that only one team from Cal Poly's conference did get in. It happened to be Cal Poly. It's not something where they really did take SMU's position. But I do agree that is a big snub from this tournament.
Going down, number 8, Kentucky facing number 9, Kansas State. This is going to be a tough matchup. While Kentucky is young, they still have played hard throughout the season, and they're in the tournament for a reason. They've played well enough to get to the big dance here. Kansas State, just as good. Sutherland playing well this year. It's a toss-up, but in the end, I think Kentucky will march on, move on to the next round to earn a spot to face Wichita State.
All right, now next we're jumping to St. Louis versus the winner of the NC State Xavier game. Now this is a tough one for me to call because St. Louis hasn't necessarily been the dominant team that they were earlier this season, and it's very much dependent in my mind upon the winner of the NC State Xavier game. Assuming that NC State wins this because wins that playing game because I believe they will, I have NC State upsetting St. Louis, the 12 seed winning, because I really love Warren. This guy knows how to play. He's a big-time scorer. Look out for him.
And they'll be facing the winner of the number 4 Louisville, number 13 Manhattan. I think it's no contest. I think Louisville runs away with it. I mean, you're talking about Manhattan heading into a buzzsaw of a team of Louisville who beat Rutgers in the conference tournament 92-31. 31 points in the entire game. They beat them by 60. That has to be a scary thought for Manhattan, but they're up for the challenge. They're not backing down, but I think Louisville's going to run away with this.
Yeah, next, we're going to another play-in game potential matchup. We look at UMass versus the winner of Iowa and Tennessee, and once again, I gotta be looking at who wins this play-in game because I think it will be a much different look depending upon who wins. If it's Tennessee, I see UMass winning. If it's Iowa, I see Iowa winning. In the end, I think Iowa takes this. I love Roy Devin Marble. The guy is a true senior. He's playing like it right now. If they can knock down their outside shots, because a lot of what their offense is based upon the three-point game, I believe that they're going to be able to upset UMass and be headed to the next round.
Next game we have is number 3 Duke facing number 14 Mercer. Mercer is a solid team. They knocked off Dunk City in the Atlantic Sun Conference tournament, and Duke, they're a mainstay in the tournament. Krzyzewski always has them on a roll, and I think they're going to continue that roll, beating Mercer, and it's not going to be a contest. Jabari Parker and Hood will take care of Mercer.
Next, we go to the 7-10 game. We're talking about Texas and Arizona State. And Texas, early in conference play, was starting to look like a team that could be making potentially even a Final Four run. They were looking real strong. They've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit, just 6-6 in their last 12 games. But Arizona State, same thing. They're 6-6 in their last 12 games. In the end, I really like Arizona State's size. The fact is that when you have Baczynski in the middle, who is the all-time leader in terms of blocks in the Pac-12 conference and formerly the Pac-10 conference, I just think that they're going to be able to handle the paint and be able to escape with a very hard-fought and tough win against the Longhorns.
And finally, finishing our first round, you have number 2 Michigan facing number 15 Wofford. And like you said for Villanova, need I say more? I think Michigan's just going to run away with this. I don't see Wofford putting up much of a fight. And number 2 versus 15, I think it's pretty conclusive who I think is going to win.
All right, well, let's jump up to the West, finishing our last section of the first round. Chad, it's your turn to take on the number 1 seeded game. What do you think?
Number 1 Arizona against number 16 Weber State. I think Arizona just runs away with it. It's a first round matchup, 1 versus 16. Even with the absence of Brandon Ashley, I think that Gordon will take over and lead them to the victory.
Next, we look at Gonzaga versus Oklahoma State. Now, you have to think back not too long ago. Oklahoma State was without Marcus Smart because of his suspension, but since he's come back, they're 5-2. They have been able to put together some really good wins, and their only losses were in overtime against ranked teams. So Marcus Smart coming back has really improved the status of this team. While Gonzaga, better record, they don't play in as tough of a conference. Big 12 definitely being one of the top 2 conferences in the country. I like Oklahoma State as the 9 seed, getting the win against Gonzaga.
And after that, next we have number 5 Oklahoma facing number 12 North Dakota State. I think Oklahoma wins this one. They're 7-5 in the last 12 games. North Dakota State is 11-1. But you got to consider the quality of opponents that Oklahoma is facing compared to North Dakota State. They are 23-9. North Dakota State 25-6. Overall, when it comes down to it, I think the number 5 will prevail. I think Oklahoma is the better team. They play better opponents and will be better prepared. So, in the end, number 5 moving on to the second round.
Next, we have the number 4 versus number 13, San Diego State against New Mexico State. Both these teams, I haven't personally seen a whole lot of this season, but San Diego State was a top 5 or 6 team in the country just a month or so ago. In the end, I just think while they did lose their last game against New Mexico, I think they knock off the other New Mexico team in the New Mexico State Aggies. San Diego State goes ahead and wins this one.
Next, number 6 Baylor facing off against red-hot number 11 Nebraska. I think this is going to be a closer matchup than most people may think. Nebraska riding the hot streak that they are, beating the teams that they are. But I think when it comes down to it, Baylor pulls away with it. I think that they're 10-2 in the last 12 games. Nebraska's 9-3. But I think Baylor will pull away with it, head to the second round.
Well, I personally think Baylor's a little bit overrated to be a 6 seed. But, definitely that should be an exciting one to look at. Next, we go to Creighton versus the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana Lafayette. Doug McDermott, too much Doug McDermott for the Raging Cajuns to handle. They'll be just fine in the end, and Creighton moves on.
Next, number 7 Oregon against number 10 Brigham Young. Oregon struggled in the middle of the season, but they were able to regain their swagger, and they continued to take care of business as of late, earning them a number 7 seed. I think Oregon is the better team here. I think their high-powered offense will prevail. They'll go to the second round.
Well, interesting fact, Oregon did play BYU earlier this year and did win by 4 at home. So I think that's going to be a really fun potential rematch that we'll see. I think that'll be a good one. Next, we'll finish off our first round of games, Wisconsin versus American. We've gone through the 2 seeds. It's they're almost considered that 1-16 status. Number 2 Wisconsin will take care of business here. All right, now we're going to roll back into the South here, going through our round of 32 games. First one that we're going through, I'll go ahead and handle the number 1 seed here, Chad. We got Florida versus Pittsburgh. Now, I think Florida's got it. Like I said before, they're rolling right now. They're the SEC tournament and regular season champions. I see them making good work of Lamar Patterson and the Pittsburgh Panthers.
The next matchup we have is number 12 SF Austin against number 4 UCLA. Plain and simple, I think UCLA will take care of number 12. I think that UCLA is too powerful for Austin, and that the quality of opponents that UCLA has played will show, and the lack of quality of opponents SF Austin will play that they have played will show, and it will be a better game than most people think, but I by no means would call it a close game.
Next, we look at the 6 versus the 3, Ohio State versus Syracuse. I think Syracuse is going to look a little bit more like the undefeated team we saw earlier this year, even if that takes some late game heroics from a guy like Tyler Ennis. I see Syracuse knocking off the Buckeyes here, and the Ohio State goes home a little bit disappointed, and great career from Aaron Craft.
Great career for Aaron Craft. Next, we have number 7 New Mexico facing off against number 2 Kansas. Now, the problem with Kansas, as I noted earlier, they're missing their star center Joel Embiid. Many people I saw last week that they were saying that he could get back. They could get him back in the Sweet 16 or later. I don't see that making any difference because I think New Mexico will knock off Kansas. I think that New Mexico is a good team that they can neutralize Andrew Wiggins, and with without Embiid's presence, Kansas is going to fall. New Mexico is going to march on.
Well, I mean, we saw New Mexico neutralize Sean Kilpatrick earlier this season and win against Cincinnati. So, and like I said, before they had beaten San Diego State a couple times. So, definitely a fun matchup. Really interesting that you're picking that upset there. So, let's go ahead and move on into the East. Chad, you handle the number 1 seed game here. So, go ahead and lead us off.
Number 1, Virginia facing off against number 9, George Washington. Plain and simple, I think they'll continue to march on and continue this hot streak that they're on. Virginia wins.
Next, we look at the 4-5 matchup, Cincinnati, Michigan State. Now, these are two teams that I think could make some deep runs if they weren't having to play each other in the second round of the tournament. I like Sparty in this one. Unfortunately, we'll see the end of great careers from Justin Jackson, Sean Kilpatrick, and Titus Rubles. But don't be surprised if they go down with a huge fight.
Next matchup we have is number 11, Providence, facing off against number 3, Iowa State. I think Edgem and Kane will put on great performances. They'll show Providence that they're here to play. They're not ready to leave, and they want to continue to make their presence felt in this tournament. Iowa State will march on after beating Providence.
Next, we look at the number 7 Connecticut Huskies versus the number 2 Villanova Wildcats. Now, I personally think that that UConn is a little underseeded here. I don't see them as being a 7 seed. I see them being a better team than that. And because of that, I think they're going to beat a familiar opponent in Villanova, former conference opponents. I see them pulling off the upset, and we're going to see a 7 seed into the Sweet 16. Now let's go ahead and jump over to the Midwest. I handled the number 1 seeded game here. So I'll start with Wichita State versus Kentucky. It's a 1 versus an 8. While Kentucky's size may be a huge advantage to them, I still see the Shockers pulling off this victory. Very, very difficult win for them, but I think they can do it.
The next game we have is NC State going up against Louisville. But Louisville has had a great season. I think it's going to continue. State has had some great wins, but I think the talent that Louisville has is just a bit better, and I think you'll see that in a victory by Louisville.
Next, we're looking at Iowa versus Duke. Now, Duke is one of those teams that can be a real interesting team to me because I find that they either lose one of their first 2 games or you'll see them playing for the national championship. The problem is that we're still in one of the first 2 rounds for them, and I think they're going to see themselves fall off. They're just not as, in my mind, senior-led as a team like Iowa, and I see Iowa pulling off the upset and moving on to the Sweet 16.
Next, we have number 10, Arizona State, facing off against number 2, Michigan. I think Arizona State is a good team. They've played good. They've had great wins. However, I think this is the end of the road for them. I think Michigan will pull off the expected win. They are the higher seed, which are always expected to win. I think their talent is a little bit better than Arizona State's, and I think you'll see that in the result. I think it's going to be about 10, 15-point game with Michigan winning it.
I think their three-point shooting is just going to be too hard for a team like Arizona State to stop because, unfortunately, Michigan's offense is not predicated on getting inside where a guy like Baczynski can make some plays for them. Now let's go ahead and move on to the West. Chad, you handle the number 1 seed here. Take it away.
The number 1 Arizona facing off against number 9 Oklahoma State and Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart has helped the Cowboys regain fans' belief in the team again, but I think that Arizona will pull off this win. It'll be a close win. Even with Brandon Ashley gone, I think, again, Gordon will step up. And with some, maybe people were not expecting that aren't on our radars. You always have those March Madness MVPs, the people that come out of nowhere to help their team rise up to the occasion. I think they'll have help. Arizona will squeak by Oklahoma State and move on.
All right, next we're looking at Oklahoma versus San Diego State. Two teams that I'm personally not very high on. I think both are coming in to this game not on the highest of notes, where San Diego State lost their conference championship to New Mexico. Oklahoma is only 7-5 in their last 12 games, considering the fact that they are still a 5 seed. But in the end, I think we're going to be seeing Oklahoma pull off this victory. It'll be very, very close. In the end, I like the Big 12 over the Mountain West.
Next, we have number 6 Baylor facing off against number 3 Creighton, and McBuckets is going to do it again. He's going to continue to show us why he is the player that is favored to win the Wooden Award, why he is so highly touted. He scores. I mean, he's in the top 10 for career scoring list, and that's an amazing feat in and of itself. I think he'll continue that scoring with some help from his teammates. Blue Jays will move on to the next round.
Last second round matchup to look at, we're talking about the Oregon Ducks versus the Wisconsin Badgers. If we're talking about mascots, I think the Ducks would have a chance in this one just because we love the Duck mascot. In the end, though, Wisconsin is going to pull this one off. It's not a push-up matchup here. We're talking about some basketball. Wisconsin pulls this one off. They're just a little bit too talented for the Oregon Ducks to compete with. Now let's go back up into the South, where we're going to be covering our Sweet 16 games. We got Florida versus UCLA, and then we have Syracuse versus New Mexico. I'll take this first one, Chad. Florida versus UCLA. Just too much talent on this Florida team. They're going to keep rolling in this one. UCLA, while they're playing really, really good basketball right now, in the end, I think there's just too much going on with the Florida Gators. Billy Donovan's too good of a coach for them to be out of the tournament this early.
And next, we have number 3 Syracuse against number 7 New Mexico. And it's Syracuse, March Madness, Jim Boeheim, Fair, and Ennis. All those combined, it's not looking good for New Mexico. And while they've been struggling, Syracuse has been struggling recently, I think they'll find their groove. And once they find that groove, teams better watch out. And I think Syracuse will have found their groove and they'll move on to the next round.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the East, where we have Virginia versus Michigan State, and then Iowa State versus Connecticut. Chad, why don't you handle the first one here?
We have Virginia against Michigan State, number 1 versus number 4. I think number 1 will prevail. I think Virginia, there's just that Cinderella feeling in a sense. Yeah, they're not a lower seed, but they're not a team that many people expected to be a number 1 at all. They're not a team that many people expected to be in the top 10 at the end of the regular season, but they are. They're here. They're number 1. Nation, if you guys didn't believe it now, like you haven't believed it yet, they're going to make you believe it once they beat Michigan State. It'll be a nitty-gritty win, but they'll win in the end. They'll make their mark felt.
Well, let's not forget the fact that they ended up winning both the regular season and the conference tournament in the ACC. Not an easy thing to do, especially with the new additions of teams like Syracuse and Pittsburgh. Now let's go ahead and go to the Iowa State-Connecticut matchup. You could almost compare this Connecticut feeling in a way to something with the Kemba Walker National Championship that they won because the leader of this team is Shabazz Napier, who, let's not forget, was a teammate of Kemba Walker's. He really got to study under the talent of Kemba Walker. But in the end, I don't see them having enough to beat Iowa State. It'll be a very, very exciting game, something fun to watch, but Iowa State, just too many weapons for this team. Now we're moving on to the Midwest. We got Wichita State versus Louisville, and then we're looking at Iowa versus Michigan. A little Big Ten matchup in that second one. But I'll go ahead and handle this first game, Wichita State versus Louisville. You're the former national champions in the Louisville Cardinals, but they did lose a lot. Let's not forget that. Peyton Siva is gone. You look at Gorgie Jang is gone, and they don't have that story behind them with Kevin Ware. And that
He's redshirted.
He was redshirted. He's not on the team. But that story behind it, where they're playing for him, that magic really isn't there for them this year. While I think they're better than a 4 seed, I just think most teams are going to show up big against them, game in and game out. And Wichita State's going to take this one in what I believe will come down to possibly a last-second bucket.
Next, we have number 11 Iowa against number 2 Michigan. Big Ten matchup, like you said. These teams have seen a lot of each other this year, and I think Michigan's going to pull away. I think you have good players on each team, but Michigan has been here before. They've had more recent success in the NCAA tournament than Iowa, and I think that experience will help them. They will know how to play under pressure, how to keep their poker face on, and not let Iowa agitate them. And I think that Michigan will move on to the next round after beating Iowa.
Well, I mean, you look at the fact that they have played each other twice this year. They went 1-1 against each other, so this is kind of that all in for it. Who's going to be considered the season leader between the two? But you have Michigan in that one. We're going to jump up into the West here. We got Arizona versus Oklahoma and Creighton versus Wisconsin. Chad, this was your number one, so go ahead and handle that first game for us.
Arizona just continues to prove and get their job done. And people will wonder how in the world can they get it done when they've lost a player like Brandon Ashley, who really helped dilute the concentration on Aaron Gordon. But they do. They just keep doing. It's not pretty basketball, but they keep getting it done. I see them continue to get it done, beating Oklahoma.
I mean, Sean Miller is a fantastic coach, but we'll go ahead and jump to the Creighton-Wisconsin matchup. And, this was another one where we're starting to see, in the end, this really kind of back-and-forth feel to it. Like, it could go either way. You got to go with Doug McDermott here. In the end, I don't see Wisconsin having that number one guy. While I think Frank Kaminsky is a very talented player, Doug McDermott is just too much for this Wisconsin team to handle. That really isn't the same kind of team that we've seen in the past under Bo Ryan that really focuses on slowing down the game, and we'll see final scores that are something like 49-45. This is not the same Wisconsin team, and because of that, I think Creighton is going to be able to pick up the win because Wisconsin cannot get enough defense going. Now we're looking at our Elite Eight matchups. In the South, we have Florida versus Syracuse. In the East, we have Virginia versus Iowa State. Midwest, Wichita State versus Michigan. And in the West, we're having Arizona versus Creighton. So, Chad, let's go ahead and talk this one out, all right? We have Florida versus Syracuse. I mean, we're talking about two absolutely fantastic coaches, Billy Donovan and Jim Boeheim. Both will go down as some of the best coaches in college basketball of this era, possibly even in the history of basketball. Billy Donovan has 2 national championships. Jim Boeheim has 1. But in the end, we do need to talk about the players here because they're the ones that are going to have to win it on the court.
I mean, Florida hasn't lost in a while. Syracuse has lost more recently. And it's once you lose, you have to find that momentum again. You have to find something to regain that momentum. And when you have a team that is basically like a runaway train, how are you going to stop them? What defense, what brick wall do you have to stop the momentum? Syracuse doesn't have that. They have some great talent on there. They have C.J. Fair. They have Tyler Ennis. But Scotty Wilbekin, great player, has been doing well. And he's their star of that team for Florida. He is the motivator of that team.
But we can't forget the talent Casey Prather brings, right, as well as Patrick Young, who has almost a Ben Wallace feel to him. Maybe not that he's not that defensive machine. He's got a little bit better scoring, but he's that energy guy where when he slams one home, this team is just pumped. They are ready to go. They turn it on when something like that happens. That is. I just don't see Syracuse having that same guy where if, C.J. Fair slams one down and you don't see the team kind of getting fueled up by that in the same regard that you see with Patrick Young in Florida.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. When it comes down to it, though, like I said, Florida right now is a runaway train, and I don't see Syracuse having that brick wall or that barrier to stop them, and I think Florida could possibly run away with this one. They have the high-powered offense to do this, and I think by this time you'll start to see possibly a slower down Syracuse, tired, when Florida is still running on adrenaline because of all their wins that they're accumulating.
And, I think Florida also has the ability to break down a 2-3 zone, something that Syracuse runs very, very well, but I agree Florida's taking this one. They're just too much for Syracuse, and unfortunately, Jim Boeheim is going to see a team that held on to a number one seed, the number one ranking for quite a few weeks, is going to go down without even a trip into the Final Four. Now we're looking at a matchup between Virginia and Iowa State in the East. Chad, I really love this Virginia team. If it wasn't for the fact that they were playing in such a tough group, you could see them making a run into the Final Four. I just see Iowa State having so much talent coming from the Big 12, which again, as I stated earlier, is one of the two best conferences in the country between them and the Big 10. Virginia, I really love Joe Harris. He's an absolute machine when it comes to shooting three-pointers. But the thing that I think is impressive about Virginia is they really don't have that one or two guys that are going to put up 18 to 20 points every single game. They just have a lot of guys who can give you 10 to 12 every game, and they just play great defense. Can the defense stop a guy like Melvin Ejim or a guy like DeAndre Kane and the three-point shooting arsenal that is the Iowa State Cyclones?
I think Virginia's dream season will come to an end here. I think, yes, Virginia is a defensive team, holding opponents to only 55.3 points per game. But how do you approach a team that has two solid scorers in DeAndre Kane, averaging 17 points per game, 6.7 rebounds, and 5.8 assists, and Melvin Ejim, who's averaging 18.1 points per game and 8.5 rebounds? Those are two solid players. And I think that Iowa State's offense will be enough to kind of break through the defensive title that Virginia has gotten throughout this season, and I think that Iowa State will pull off a win and upset.
So we've handled the left side of the bracket. We have Florida and Iowa State moving into the Final Four. Let's go ahead and jump over to the right side. We'll start in the Midwest. We've got Wichita State versus Michigan. This is a really, really interesting matchup because, we talk about Michigan having with their three-point arsenal, because that is one thing that they've done a really good job of. Stauskas is the Big Ten Player of the Year, and a lot of that is because of the fact that he can just shoot threes lights out. LeVert is another talented player. Walton. These guys, like I said, they can shoot threes. If Robinson is going to the hoop, this can be a very dangerous team. If Glenn Robinson is trying to shoot up threes, they're going to be they're going to struggle a little bit more because of that, because he's going to be settling. I like Wichita State in this matchup. I just see them being able to win this one, keeping the, again, maybe Cinderella story isn't the right term for it because they are number one seed. But the fact is that they are still playing in the Missouri Valley Conference. They're not really known to be a powerful team, but they're going to be making their second straight trip into the Final Four, much like we saw with the Butler Bulldogs of a couple years ago.
I think that Wichita State definitely has something going for them. They, according to our bracket, they just keep on winning, and they continue to have that zero in the loss column. When will that zero become a 1? But I think for now, matching up against Michigan, I think they will pull off a win. It will be a closer win, but I see them going into the Final Four.
All right, let's pick our last Final Four team. We're looking at Arizona versus Creighton. Now, what we've noticed a lot so far with this bracket is when we pick these Arizona games, we keep mentioning the loss of Brandon Ashley. When will that catch up to them? Well, how about right here? How about when they have to face Doug McDermott? How about when they have to face a team like the Creighton Blue Jays that are finally going to break through when we've expected them to just have a chance every single year? Why not this? This could be their year. And in the end, I think the loss of Brandon Ashley, who may have had to cover Doug McDermott, that is going to be something that hurt them in the end. Now you're potentially relying on a freshman to guard a senior who, while Aaron Gordon is talented, Doug McDermott has all the moves to get past a freshman and handle him. I like Creighton in this one. I see them going on into the Final Four.
One name, Nick Buckets, that's all you need to know for Creighton. I see them finally ending Arizona's run. Sean Miller's a great coach, but this will be when they just can't make up for it anymore. I see that. I see Creighton overpowering them and scoring more than what Arizona can score, and thus Creighton ending the number one, the Arizona's run, and going on to the Final Four.
All right, so let's review our Final Four. We have Florida versus Iowa State and Creighton versus Wichita State. Let's go ahead and start with that Florida-Iowa State matchup. What do you kind of see as maybe the storyline of this game?
I mean, Florida went undefeated in the SEC. They won the conference tournament, and they just keep on winning. Again, like I said in the Syracuse game, how prepared is a team to face a runaway train? Do they feel like they're Superman or the Hulk and can stop them with one hand and just take on all that pressure and stop them in their tracks? They might, but I don't see that happening. I see Florida being the stronger team between them. Personally, I like what Iowa State's done this season. I like to see them do well, and they have. But I don't see them strong enough to beat number one Florida.
Well, I mean, one thing that I have to say about Florida is you look at some of the games that they played. They're not conference. They did play Kansas, and they did beat Kansas. While, maybe that's not necessary. In the end, we can't say that's Iowa State because it's not. Because Kansas and Iowa State are two very different teams. But we look at the fact that Kansas did beat Iowa State twice out of 3 times this year, and that is a huge advantage to a team like to a team like Florida. But I mean, it just shows the fact that Florida has beaten tough teams out of conference. When I think we can all agree that the SEC was not a great conference this year. But Florida, like you said, runaway train right now. They have turned it on at all the right times. And I think the most impressive thing is that they're not just beating teams by a few points. They're blowing some teams out. Their average points per game compared to their average opponent's points per game is nearly a 13-point advantage. So these are not close games for them. And in the end, I think that is going to be enough because Iowa State's defense is nothing to be proud about.
Completely agree. But we're going on the other side of the bracket. We have number 3 Creighton facing number 1 Wichita State. This is going to be an interesting game because you have Creighton and all that they've done this season with McDermott going up against Wichita State, who everyone wants to be seen proven wrong. I feel like a lot of people are saying, myself included, they play in the Missouri Conference. They haven't played anyone. But yet, in the bracket, they keep beating these better teams down and advancing. Will their undefeated mark end here? That's what the storyline is going to be for this game.
I think Wichita State will not see an end to their season here. You can check my geography on this, but I do believe they are the closest located school of our Final Four to Arlington, Texas, where this game will be played. And I think you're going to see quite a few fans out at this one. And I don't mean just they're normally Wichita State fans. I think you're going to see a lot of people who root for the upsets, that root for the little guy, that are looking to have Wichita State win this game and potentially try and prove everyone wrong. And they have so much balance on this team. We're looking at we look at guys like Cleanthony Early, Ron Baker, Fred Van Vliet, to Keely Cotton, and let's not also forget that the other Wiggins is on this team. Andrew Wiggins has a brother. People may not know this, but he plays for Wichita State.
He's the older brother.
He's the older brother too. They have the experience that I don't believe Creighton does, and that will be enough to pull out the win and end the dream career that has been Doug McDermott's and Creighton. So we're moving on to our national championship game. We've got Florida versus Wichita State, 2 number 1 seeds. I don't think we've seen that for a while now. You can correct me if I'm wrong. The last team that did win it as the number 1 overall seed happened to be last year. We looked at the Louisville Cardinals. They won as the number 1 overall seed. So Florida, Chad, are they going to be a number one overall seed to win the national championship?
I mean, you have the Gators versus
The Shockers.
whatever their logo person is, the Shockers, and the Gators are a tough team. And if this was the mascot bracket, I would pick the Gators because I think the Gators are probably more powerful. But this isn't the mascot bracket, so I can't use that as my justification for picking the Gators. So let me go a different route. The Gators are by far a better team than Wichita State. I see them ending Wichita State's dream season, getting that one on the loss board, and the trophy will be going to Gainesville. I think they are a much better team. We won't blow them out by 20 points, but I see them not. I see it at an average decent score, like 14 or so points. I just don't. I think Wichita State will run out of gas. They'll be on kind of a sugar high in a sense of this success, and they'll be drained by the time they get there, and they won't play their best. And it only takes one game of not playing your best to falter to some of these better teams.
It's so hard to not have a rooting interest in a team like Wichita State. Just because you want the little guy to succeed, you root for that Cinderella story that they go undefeated, because that undefeated season from start to finish, winning a national championship, may not have happened since UCLA in the 70s. It's just not done, and Wichita State has a chance to do it. Why wouldn't you want to root for that? But Florida's going to win. I can't do it. I can't pick Wichita State to win this game. In the end, Florida just has been battle tested all season long, and that's going to be enough for them to grab a hold of this victory. We talk about wins against Kansas, win against Memphis. They beat Kentucky 3 times.
Not just beat Kentucky, they beat down Kentucky.
Amen to that one. Their only losses on the season are to 2 other tournament teams, Wisconsin and UConn. And let's not ignore the fact that Wisconsin is in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is considered to be one of the top 2 conferences. And you look at UConn. UConn has shown up in some of the biggest games all season long. They know how to play when it really matters. And let's be honest, that Florida game definitely mattered. I just think Florida has too much going for them, and they're going to be able to win this game against Wichita State. I see it as a score something along the lines of 65-52. I think that is what we ended up going with. So really, we're not even seeing a close game, and to me that can be very disappointing, because I think that's one thing that we look forward to more than anything else. Even if we have no rooting interest in the game, we want to see it close, maybe a buzzer beater to win it, something really exciting where you just can't help but
close to the Butler-Duke game.
Exactly.
They almost won on the buzzer beater.
Gordon Hayward, I can't tell you how many times I think about how I wish that had gone in. But we want to see a close game. I just don't see it. Florida has just too much talent on this roster, and Billy Donovan is going home with his 3rd national championship in 4 tries.
They'll be riding the bus back to Gainesville, singing "One Shining Moment." It'll all be a good bus ride, taking it back to Gainesville.
Well, Chad, I said I wouldn't let you. Go ahead and sing it out for me.
One shining moment.
Oh, it's beautiful. Well, guys, thanks for listening to our special March Madness podcast. Be sure to be looking out for our potential written pieces on this. I personally am looking forward to sharing my mascot bracket, where it's obviously ridiculous. It's not going to happen because I do have 16 seeds beating 1 seeds. Spoiler alert for you. But just something really fun. And we'll be sure to also keep you updated on our bracket. We went ahead and submitted that to ESPN's bracketology. We'll let you know how we're doing. Keep us updated on how you guys are doing. You can go ahead and follow us on Facebook. Post on that for the Chad and Sam Sports Hour, and the "and" is the "and" sign. Hour spelled out. Follow us on Twitter. Tweet at us about how you guys are doing. That's at Chad Sam Sports HR. And then go ahead and look at our blog. It's Chad and Sam Sports HR.wordpress.com. We want to see how you guys are doing, and we'll just so we can make sure we let you know how we're doing.
That's it. Thank you all for listening. My name's Chad, here with Sam. Have a great night.